People think betrayal comes with a thunderclap, a dramatic slow-motion scene, maybe even violins playing in the background. Nope. In my case, it came with my older brother, my own flesh and blood, telling me, in front of an entire room of people, "Sit by the trash where you fit." That's it. No cinematic lighting, no epic soundtrack. Just my brother, grinning like a politician who thinks he just scored the line of the century, while I sat there clutching the bill for dinner that I had paid for, again. And here's the plot twist. That moment wasn't the beginning of the betrayal, it was the grand finale of years of him treating me like a human ATM with no withdrawal limit. And the conspiracy theorist in me? Oh, I started connecting dots real quick. For years, I'd been the supportive sibling. You know, the one who believes in family, sticks together through hard times, and apparently funds other people's bad decisions. I was there for every emergency. Car broke down? Here's a check. Business deal fell through? Let me transfer the money. Girlfriend wanted a weekend in Cabo? Sure, I'll just skip paying my own bills this month. It's America, right? Debt is practically a love language, and I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. But looking back, I swear my brother wasn't just asking for help. He was running a long con. The man had charm, confidence, and that weird ability to make you feel like you owed him money. And the way he'd spin it? You're investing in the future of the family. Yeah, right. More like I was investing in the future of his leather jacket collection and his endless supply of business lunches that looked suspiciously like bar tabs. But I didn't question it. Not at first. Because family. Because loyalty. Because in America, we've been spoon-fed that hallmark version of sibling love where you cover for each other no matter what. I didn't realize I was basically funding my own betrayal. Now, let me tell you about the trash comment. We were at one of his business celebrations, the kind where there's a giant cake with his name on it, but somehow I was the one footing the bill. He had his crew there, all of them looking like they'd just stepped out of a music video about hustling. The champagne was flowing and my brother was telling some story about how he built his empire from scratch. I made the mistake of saying, "Yeah, and a little help from me." Everyone laughed, except him. He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sit by the trash where you fit." Like I was just background noise, like I was the unpaid intern in the movie of his life. And that's when the reality hit me. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, control. Revenge wasn't even on my mind yet. I was still in shock. But deep down, the gears started turning. Because if there's one thing Americans love more than an underdog story, it's a revenge arc. And my brother? Oh, he had just written me the perfect opening scene. Here's where the parody part kicks in. Imagine my life as one of those cheesy crime documentaries with a voiceover saying, "At first it seemed like just another family squabble, but what happened next would shatter everything." They'd show old photos of us as kids, me holding a popsicle, him already taking half of it, with ominous piano music in the background. Then a slow zoom on my face at that dinner table, realizing I'd been the unpaid financier of his so-called empire. Of course, in my head, I started crafting conspiracy theories. Maybe he'd been planning this betrayal for years. Maybe he had a secret counsel advising him on how to milk me dry without losing my loyalty. Maybe the champagne at that dinner wasn't just for show. Maybe it was the ceremonial drink they use when inducting new members into the Brotherhood of Sibling Manipulators. Sounds crazy, right? But then again, so is telling your sibling to sit by the trash after they've bankrolled half your life. That night, I went home, sat on my couch, and stared at my bank statements like they were the Dead Sea Scrolls. The evidence was all there. A timeline of withdrawals, payments, loans that were never paid back. If the FBI had been watching, they'd have thought I was laundering money for a very unorganized crime syndicate. And in a way I was. Except I wasn't getting a cut. I was the cut. I could feel something inside me shift. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. That sit by the trash line. It was like the universe smacked me across the face and said, "Wake up, idiot. You've been funding your own humiliation." And that's when the idea of revenge started to take root. Not petty revenge, not just blocking him on social media. I was thinking cinematic, empire-crushing, history-making revenge. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I stopped being his ATM and started becoming the worst thing a manipulative older brother can imagine, a younger sibling with nothing left to lose, a grudge to settle, and enough dirt to bury him twice. The thing about betrayal is, once it clicks, you start replaying every single interaction in your head. Except now, they all look like scenes from a cheap reality show where you're the clueless contestant. I started remembering moments that should have been red flags, like the time he asked me to co-sign a loan just for a month, and somehow I ended up paying it off entirely. Or the time he said he needed $5,000 for inventory, but posted Instagram stories from a Vegas pool party. And the worst part? I actually liked believing him. It was easier than admitting I was being played. But now I wasn't just the gullible sibling anymore. I had entered what I like to call my Cold War phase. No big confrontation, no shouting match, just quiet, calculated moves. Americans love the big dramatic blow-up, but trust me, the silent plotting is where the real suspense lives. I became polite, distant, even helpful, but only to collect information. Every phone call, every receipt, every email. I started archiving it all like a true conspiracy nut. I even bought one of those cork boards with red string connecting pictures and documents. My apartment started looking like the set of a Netflix docuseries about unsolved crimes. And here's where the parody writes itself. Imagine me creeping around like a wannabe secret agent, wearing sunglasses indoors, whispering into my phone recorder while pretending to talk about the weather. My friends thought I was losing it. I told them, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you, and they laughed. But I wasn't joking. The deeper I dug, the messier it got. Turns out, my brother's so-called empire wasn't just shaky. It was a house of cards built on IOUs, unpaid favors, and enough questionable deals to make a tax auditor salivate. He had vendors he hadn't paid in months, investors who were starting to ask too many questions, and a bookkeeping system that looked like it was invented by a toddler with a crayon. If betrayal was the foundation, chaos was the architecture. Somewhere in this mess, I found the crown jewel, a set of forged signatures. Mine, to be exact. He'd signed my name on a contract for a loan that was currently in default. That was the moment I stopped seeing this as a family issue and started seeing it as a legal goldmine. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. And maybe, just maybe, a little poetic payback. I started reaching out to his allies, business partners, suppliers, even that shady guy he called his consultant, who seemed to always be holding a cigar. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I just asked polite, innocent questions. And you know what happens when you start poking around polite in America? People spill. They spill like their lives depend on it. By the end of the week, I had enough dirt to plant a forest. The funniest part? He still had no idea. In his mind, I was still the loyal sibling licking my wounds. He even called me up one night, acting all friendly, saying, "Hey, we should do lunch sometime. I miss you." Oh, please. That's like the villain in a movie asking the hero to talk things out, right before trying to push them off a cliff. So, I played along. "Sure, lunch sounds great," I told him, smiling into the phone while surrounded by a table full of labeled evidence folders. My living room was basically the Pentagon now. This wasn't going to be some petty Instagram unfollow. I was building something that would make his trash comment look like a love note. What kept me going wasn't just anger, it was the anticipation. The knowledge that I was holding a secret timeline in my head, one where the empire he bragged about would crumble piece by piece. I could already see the headlines. I could already picture his face when he realized the person who destroyed his little kingdom wasn't a rival businessman or some big lawsuit. It was me, the same trash sibling he'd laughed at in front of his friends. And let me tell you something about revenge in America. It tastes better when it's served with receipts. Literal receipts. I was going to make sure every lie, every scam, every fake smile had a paper trail leading right back to him. By the time I was done, his name would be worth less than a broken vending machine. I wasn't just planning to win. I was planning to erase the scoreboard entirely. By the time the sheriffs taped the bright notice on his glass door and the lobby TV started looping the words "receivership appointed," my brother finally stopped smiling. He stood there in his designer jacket like a dethroned prom king, watching employees box up their coffee mugs while the building's security guy politely asked him for his key card. It wasn't a cinematic explosion. It was quieter, almost bureaucratic, like the sound of a giant filing cabinet slamming shut on a dream. And yes, if you're wondering, I was there. Not to gloat, okay, maybe a little, but mostly to witness the end of an era. The empire had fallen, not to a rival mogul or a market crash, but to a stack of paperwork and one stubborn sibling who decided the trash wasn't their assigned seat. If you freeze-frame that moment, you can see it in his eyes. The instant he realizes the betrayal he cultivated for years had finally come home wearing a suit called consequence. Revenge, contrary to the memes, does not arrive on a flaming chariot. It arrives certified mail, return receipt requested rewind, 48 hours. Lunch day. We chose a place with black napkins and waiters who whisper. He came in swagger first, hugged me like a politician, and launched into a monologue about new verticals and disrupting legacy vendors, the kind of buzzword smoothie he'd been serving for years. I let him talk. I laughed at all the right times. When the bread hit the table, I slid an accordion file from my bag, like a magician pulling out a scarf that never ends. Emails, contracts, the loan with my forged signature, printed on paper so thick it could survive a small hurricane. For a second he tried a familiar move. Pretend it's not a big deal, pivot to family, pull the loyalty card from the same old deck. But the trick didn't land. I'd seen behind the curtain. The wizard was just a guy with a microphone and a smoke machine. "Look," I said, keeping my voice soft the way Americans do when they're about to say something lethal. "We can do this two ways. You clean it up, pay back what you owe, clear my name, stop using me like a line of credit, or I take the scenic route." He smirked, because that's what men like him do when they think they're still winning. "What's the scenic route?" he asked. I slid over a printed timeline with arrows like a football coach's playbook. Regulators, lenders, investors, IRS, and your favorite, vendors who haven't been paid since the Obama years. He reached for the papers. I pulled them back. "Copies," I said. "Everyone already has copies." If this were a fantasy movie, this is where the dragon would appear. And in a way, it did. Except the dragon was the IRS agent who returned my call with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for BOGO sales. The forged signature lender. They were very interested in hearing how their collateral didn't exist. The investors? You'd be amazed how fast rich people can sprint when they smell smoke in a building they own. The vendors? I didn't have to say class action out loud. The silence did the job. My plan wasn't a knockout punch. It was 1,000 paper cuts delivered on schedule, each slice labeled with a date and a statute number. It's the most American kind of revenge, lawful, document-heavy, and served with an affidavit. He tried scrambling the way TV villains do, calling his guy, emailing the team, promising a bridge round. But the bridge was already out. The moment the lender flagged the forged contract, the dominoes started falling. Insurance called it a material misrepresentation. The bank called the line of credit. The investors called their lawyers. And the state called to schedule a friendly chat about taxes that had apparently gone on vacation. He still thought he could bluff the table, but you can't out-talk a ledger. Numbers don't care about charisma. Numbers bring receipts to a gunfight. Here's the part I didn't expect. The apologies that arrived like junk mail. People from his circle DM'd me confessions. "We knew something was off. He said you were on board. He told us family money means no paperwork." And that last one nearly made me laugh out loud. In America, family money means more paperwork. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was contagious. He'd infected everyone around him with this easy little lie that loyalty is a blank check. I was done honoring that religion. I'd found a new one, accountability, the church where the hymns are sung in spreadsheets. The day before the receivership, he showed up at my apartment. No entourage, just him and that stubborn arrogance, dulled at the edges. He didn't ask how I was. He asked how I could do this to family. I let the word hang there, like a chandelier we both knew was about to fall. "You did this to family," I said. "I just turned on the lights." He called it revenge, and I didn't flinch. "Sure," I said. "Call it revenge. I call it ending a long con." He looked around my living room, at the corkboard and the folders and the timeline, my DIY war room, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely tired. Not sorry. Tired. There's a difference. Sorry fixes. Tired rests. He wanted rest. I wanted repair. Morning came with a weather alert. Storm of consequences. 100% chance. The lender filed. The state filed. The investors froze accounts. Vendors went from whispers to group emails with bullet points and attachments. By noon, the building manager's smile had curdled. By 2, the security cameras caught boxes rolling out. By 4, a guy in a suit I'd never met before said the word receivership, and the echo changed the shape of the room. He tried one last speech about resilience and rebuilding and the American dream, but everybody had somewhere else to be. Loyalty has an exit door. It swings fast. Did I dance? No, that would have been cheap. I took a walk instead, past the coffee shop where I'd Venmo'd his client meetings, past the store where he bought congratulations balloons for himself, past the alley with the trash bins. I stopped there because poetry loves a predictable address, and I'm not above letting it have one. I stood by the trash where he once told me I fit, and I laughed. Not the villain laugh, not the hero's either. Just a human laugh at the absurdity of it all. How a single sentence can reroute a life, how revenge sometimes looks like responsible adulthood, how betrayal is the story people tell themselves about why they deserve your kindness forever. Later, when the dust settled into paperwork piles and the gossip cooled to room temperature, I did something unglamorous. I met with a lawyer. We closed the loop on my name, wiped my credit clean, set in motion the boring miracles that rebuild a life. I told my therapist I didn't want to be fueled by rage anymore. She said that's progress. I said it feels like quiet. She said quiet is what comes after storms, and somewhere in that quiet I realized the real twist. I hadn't shattered his empire. He had. I just refused to hold up the corner he was standing on. If you want the last line, it goes like this. At a family cookout months later, an aunt asked where my brother was. I said, "Getting honest." She nodded like it was a city. Maybe someday he'll move there. Maybe not. Either way, I'm done funding the ticket. I built something else with my money this time. Boundaries. They don't look like much, but trust me, in this country, they're priceless.